First, I would like to take a moment at the beginning of this hearing to express my deepest condolences to those affected by the devastating tornado that impacted Ranking Member Thompson's Mississippi District this past weekend. And secondly, I would certainly be remiss if I did not also acknowledge yet another tragic act of gun violence in our schools that left 6 dead in Nashville, 3 school children and 3 teachers. I think the contrast of the natural disasters and mass shootings that we are facing as a nation is pretty sharp with respect to the issue that's being brought forward before this hearing, this committee today, this manufactured northern border crisis. The facts do not support the Republican claim that the northern border is, quote, a source of death, drugs, and disorder. In fact, with respect to the northern border crisis, I think by contrast, if I could have our quote, one of our fellow colleagues here on the committee has said, "I'm not worried about the northern border." And he's not alone in that statement. There are other members who've made similar statements from the Republican side of the aisle, also on this committee, who stated that before. But let me say this, if we're gonna be here and discuss this today, and clearly we are, I wanna make sure that everybody understands that this is not a problem that began under the Biden administration. In 2019, the GAO highlighted the Trump administration's decision to focus on the southwest border, which led to a significant staffing and resource challenge at the northern border. In fact, the Trump administration compounded that problem then that same year by terminating a contract with an outside contractor. I believe it was Accenture, but I'll say that's subject to check. But before they were able to actually expedite the much-needed staffing increases, the Trump administration terminated that contract for convenience. As a result, CBP's numbers of apprehensions between ports of entry hit a high watermark in FY 2019 under the President Trump, with 4,408 apprehensions compared to the 2,856 encounters the Border Patrol had in FY 2023. Can we have the second exhibit as well? I think this chart shows, with the red being 2019, the number from the year I just was discussing, the high water mark being in the Trump administration, FY 22 has gone up from FY 21, but it's still short of the numbers we experienced in 2019, or 2018 for that matter. I want to be clear about this as well. I know there's a lot of issues about the statistical discussions, and we'll have more chance to discuss those at length. I think we'll have witnesses who are going to give detailed comments and explanations. But I want to make sure we're on the same page with respect to our definitions of encounters and apprehensions and arrests. I'll come back to that in a moment. But with respect to the major point of this hearing, I would assume, is that if we're going to fix the problem, we have to commit resources to doing that. And as I said at a previous hearing in this committee, this is the show me the money moment. One way of measuring whether there's people are serious about addressing a problem is by looking at the budgets and the efforts they make to commit money to fix the problems. In December, Democrats passed the Omnibus Appropriations Bill. And as I discussed at our previous hearing back in February, to help DHS manage the border, the bill added 300 additional Border Patrol agents, 125 more CBP officers and related personnel, and more than $400 million for non-intrusive inspections systems to interdict drugs. And the non-intrusive inspections are important because Canada is our, I believe, #2 trading partner. And so we don't want to delay the intercourse between the two countries with excessive and extensive inspections. We want to make sure that the products between the United States and Canada can flow quickly and efficiently. In addition to that, though, the bill also authorized a new $800 million shelter and services grant program to improve CBP's operational capabilities and to help manage the border by reducing overcrowding in facilities. Only 2 Republicans currently serving in the entire House of Representatives voted for that bill, and neither of them serve on this committee. Not only have Republicans voted against this funding, they failed to put forward a workable plan or markup any viable legislation that could actually fix this so-called crisis at the northern border. And I hope the witnesses will discuss H.R. 9023, which is Member Tenney's bill. And I believe Congressman Stauber's a co-sponsor of that bill. But I do want to point out right now, so they'll have a chance to respond, that this bill only speaks to, even if we assume that the transfer of money from the IRS were to actually happen, under the actual provisions of this bill, the money could only go to the southern border. So in a possible reflection of their view of the importance of the northern border, it isn't even addressed in that legislation. Instead of relying on the Republicans, we've had to count on the Democrats to address these problems. And that continues to this day with President Biden's new budget proposal, which would fund even more major investments in both the technology and facilities at the northern border. For example, the president's proposed budget would provide $66 million for the construction of a new border patrol facility in Maine, as well as devoting $38 million for surveillance towers on both the northern and southern borders. In addition, the president's budget request includes $600 million for workforce pay raises and proposes the hiring of 350 more border patrol agents, 150 field operations officers, 175 border patrol processing coordinators, 244 border patrol mission support staff, and 46 field operations mission and operations staffs. The Republicans had offered no specifics, only rhetoric. I'll leave it to my colleagues and the witnesses to discuss our trading relationship with Canada. As I mentioned, it's clearly a critical relationship for the United States economy. And there's nothing going on with respect to Canada that merits them being treated like some kind of rogue state. As a matter of fact, the Biden-Trudeau meeting, I think, from last week is an indication that they're a good working partner with the United States and that we've been able to, in the past and will continue to be able in the future, to work through problems in a way that is joint and effective. Lastly, I want to mention that on a separate note, about a month ago, I sent a letter to the committee expressing my thoughts about additional or another type of investigation that we should be pursuing. With respect to the DHS OIG, there have been allegations that surfaced in the last Congress, and two chairmen at the time sent letters to the IG demanding documents on 2 fronts. One was with respect to allegations of sexual harassment going on inside that office and demanding documents in response to address that. The second was the failure of the OIG to produce or inform Congress until 14 months later that text messages with respect to January 6th had been apparently deleted. That issue, I've thought, merited a hearing, especially since, given this committee's jurisdiction of oversight, is sort of right down the middle of the alley for where we should be looking, as opposed to a border issue when we've got a subcommittee that's focused on borders. I would renew my request to have a hearing on those issues with respect to the OIG's conduct. I think it's critical for us to get to the bottom of it. The IG role in all of these departments, as we know from the Watergate era, is critical in making sure that they function appropriately, and we need to make sure that they're able to perform that mission and are focused on doing it correctly in a thorough, objective, and transparent way. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me a chance to offer my opening statement. With that, I yield back.